What's up, folks? I'm Deeg. This is the Deeg Podcast. I'm here today with Snebzor. How's it going, Sneb?
It's going well, my friend.
Can I call you Sneb?
Yeah,
Is that
everyone calls me
okay?
Sneb.
You know, my name is Greg, IRL. The only person in the world who called me Gregory was my grandmother. So I wonder if you have like old acquaintances too who like call you Snebzor. Like, what's the split?
Uh, what's the split? Well, I mean, it's actually a good story.
Oh,
So I picked my screen name because my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, so my mom's dad, he was an airplane mechanic in World War II for, for the Royal Canadian Air Force, and he was positioned in the UK. And so all of his buddies, growing up and in the war, they all called him Sneb,
hmm,
and that was just his nickname. And so my grandfather passed away when I was a teenager, and I just kind of took the name. I tried to make everything just Sneb, 4 letters, but of course it was taken everywhere. So I thought I need a
mm,
random suffix. So I just picked
yeah,
Zor. There's no like, nothing cool about that part. But
yeah.
yeah, so everyone calls me Sneb. I like to think that I keep the memory of my grandfather alive with that. And he's a good man, very good man.
That's amazing. What about your
Yeah.
grandfather? Like, what qualities did you admire about him?
He was very much a person that focused on community and family.
Okay.
So he grew up in a small town, right? Maybe when he was growing up, there was maybe only a few hundred or maybe 1,000 max.
Mhm.
He grew up on a farm and he was a farmer his whole life. So he knew what hard work meant.
Mhm.
And he lived that. He was somebody who, I mean, farmers around here, they all help each other, right? Equipment breaks down, out of gas, whatever it is. It's just about helping others.
Around
So my
here, like, is
grandfather
that
was just
somewhere in the
somebody that really
Midwest of
cared.
America, or what's that mean?
I'm in Western Canada, in
Word.
province of Alberta.
Okay, okay.
It's directly above Montana.
I didn't know you were Canadian.
Yeah, from
Cool.
Alberta.
Word. All right, sorry, please
Yeah.
continue.
No, I mean, that's kind of it. He's just somebody who was very devout in his faith and worked for his community and his family. He had many kids. He underwent many trials. He had several kids pass away. And he just was somebody who just kept pushing forward and kept going when things were tough. And he was somebody who just served his whole life.
Sounds like someone who's really easy to admire.
Very easy to admire. Yeah.
That's really incredible that you would continue his memory in your name, his legacy as a sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I do it justice. I mean, I don't, many times I probably don't think I do. He was a very, very good man, very good man. And he did a lot. He did a lot for this communities.
Cool, cool. Well, let's talk about how you honor that legacy. Sneb, I got to know you best, I think, when I first started hearing you on Tea Time on Mighty Teapot show. And especially around the conversation, I really think I've gotten to know you better with the conversation around Guild Wars 2's recent expansion, End of Dragons, which is amazing. And I loved it, and a lot of people have. But there's one part of it where the love is not so clear. Specifically, what a reading that Coily refers to as the Jade Sea meta event, what we all know as Dragon's End, and the community division that comes to that, and the strife in the community division. Sneb, I've heard you say many times that the division in our community bothers you, and that's where I want to get back to. But before we get there, I want to rewind it a little bit more. And I want to ask you, how did you get into Guild Wars, streaming Guild Wars 2? What's your story? What's your path? How did you get here?
True, it's actually a long one. So I
Ooh,
actually
buckle up.
started making YouTube videos as a teenager. A lot of people don't know that. I made YouTube videos and I was making Call of Duty commentaries because that was the thing back in the day, right? So I was
Nice.
playing Call of Duty, I was talking about gameplay. Then I lost interest in Call of Duty, right?
Okay.
And I mean, I still
Why?
kept up with those person. Why? Oh, it
Yeah.
just wasn't the game for me. Like
Mm.
people were brutal to each other
Yes.
online. Honestly, that's what it
Yes.
was. It was like really, really toxic.
The constant
So, and I
competition
wasn't
wears on
that
you.
good at it, right? I just played with friends, and as my friends drifted away from the game, I sort of drifted away from the game too. And
The classic
I was like,
story.
well, I've always played Guild Wars. So I started making Guild Wars 1 commentaries. We just talk about random stuff, playing Guild Wars. And then I started making little guides and things. And I had a guild and we would do fun things together and I would share that. And so it was pretty casual, but I made a lot of that kind of stuff. And then Guild Wars 2 got announced. And I'm actually, as I look back, I think, wow, as a teenager, it's like I knew stuff that I know now, but in a very informal way, because my background now is in consumer behavior and marketing.
Right.
Uh, and and so back then, I realized that if I wanted to like break the algorithm, I needed to be the first one to get the news out about Guild
Mm.
Wars 2. So I
Mhm.
started setting alerts and stuff for Twitter that would wake me up at 2 in the morning, and I would make a video like at 2 in the morning. My parents
Wow.
hated that. They hated it so much they took my computer away multiple times. But I started making those sorts of videos. I'd make videos about like the map, and I'd make videos about the dynamic event system and combat, and like I just was making all these little videos just talking about my thoughts and be like, oh, there's this new article they posted, this is so exciting.
Uh-huh.
I went to PAX East after I graduated high school with my dad, and I saw, them reveal some Guild Wars 2 gameplay, and I was in the auditorium for that, and everyone was freaking out, and they gave us beta keys, and that's
Hype.
kind of where it started. And
Hype.
back in the day, it was like Matt Visual had like a few hundred subscribers, and I did videos with Matt Visual.
I didn't know
Wooden
that.
Potato. Yeah, I did like we did like talks, like a podcast, like we're doing
Cool.
now, but we had like
Cool.
these little short discussions. And then I don't know if you know who Kai Dream is. I think she actually works
Huh.
in the game industry now. But she started making videos. I then also, there's a guy named Tube Elephant, Psycho Power Ranger, all of these people that we're all on Skype talking to each other all the time. And then one day, so what I used to do is I used to go, who else makes YouTube videos about Guild Wars?
Mhm.
And I found Wooden Potatoes when he had 200 subscribers, and
Ooh.
he was doing Guild Wars 1 Let's Plays. And I remember having a conversation with Wooden Potatoes just via text and being like, hey, we should make a video together doing the Codex Arena in Guild Wars 1. But the time zones were so different, it was like impossible to do. But anyway, like I kind of go way back with that stuff. Then I sort of drifted away, largely because I was still living at home and my parents just didn't believe in it. I actually
Mhm.
was offered a machinima contract.
Shit.
Um, yeah, that I tried to go through with and everything.
What would that have been like? What was that the nature of the contract?
Basically, because at the time you couldn't really be like a YouTube partner and make gaming content because I think
Yeah.
everything was negotiated through external parties. And so if you
Okay.
wanted to get the monies for views, you needed to go through an org. I think that's what it was at the time. I could be vastly incorrect about that, but
Jeez.
anyway, I don't think it would have been like a huge deal. It's not like I was getting thousands and thousands and thousands of views. I had a couple videos that got like 10,000 views and
Sure.
stuff, but that was kind of it. So it's not like it would have been life-changing. But the problem was at the time I realized the potential of esports and gaming, and Twitch was really new, and I had this like eternal battle with my dad, and I kept being
Mm.
like, this is going to be massive, like this is going to be such a big deal, and he just didn't believe in it at all.
What did he want you to
Neither
do?
no, what's that?
What did your dad want you to do?
Anything that wasn't that, right? Like my parents considered gaming an utter waste of time, right? And they kept telling me I was wasting my time until one day I believed them, right? I was like, okay, I should just stop this. So I just kind of cold turkey stopped. I grew up in a very conservative religious background, and so
Okay.
I ended up being a missionary for 2 years in the
How was that?
Federated States of Micronesia. So I lived on an island with no running water, electricity for 2 years, and I helped people. So it was very interesting. I didn't play any games or really have any contact with the outside world at that point in my life. And I learned a very rare island language called Chuukese.
Wow.
So I'm fluent in a language that almost nobody knows.
What a unique experience. That sounds like an incredible challenge.
Oh yeah. So I was dropped off on an island, middle of the ocean, with no resources to learn the language because it's not a formally taught language like, you can't Duolingo Chukis,
Yeah, yeah.
So I was dropped on this island and just expected to figure it out, and I did.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I mean, I used other missionaries as mentors and whatnot. But that's basically the cycle is you get there and people just, I remember I used to sit down with the elders and have them tell me stories. And then every time they said a word I didn't understand, I would just write it down and then ask them after what it meant and to describe it. And it's some words like are hard to just explain, right? uh yeah, like there'd be these like slight nuances in the words that made it difficult, and then there's words that just don't exist in English that exist in other languages. It gets really confusing.
Wow.
Like, the best example I have is, the feeling when you consume a lot of fatty foods and it's
Yes.
like you like the taste of it but you're not interested in eating anymore because it like just like can't keep eating it.
Yeah,
There's
because
like a word for
it
that.
feels it tastes good, but it feels bad.
Yeah, it's like you want to keep eating the ice cream, but like you're just like, I can't.
Disgusted. Or like the moment when
Yeah.
you've had too much cheese.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So they have
yeah.
like a word specifically for that feeling,
I
and like
need that
having to
word.
have somebody describe that
What
to
is
you in
it?
another language.
What's the
Oh,
word?
what's the word? Like it's funny because I'm like desperately searching through the dictionary in my head and now I can't remember it.
No.
Now that I've described it. And in like 2 days I'll remember it again. But
Shoot it to
that's
me. I
that's the
need that word.
consequence of not practicing the language very much.
Yeah, yeah, naming things is powerful. Not having a word for something means we don't have as much command over it in our minds and our lives. It's an
Yeah.
interesting anyway, continue.
Yeah, so that's I did that, and I was there for 2 years. I came home, went to university, and I started like playing a lot of Guild Wars again because I loved the game, right? And I had a community back, and I still actually have contact with some of those folks and have met some of them IRL and stuff.
Cool.
But I just kind of played a lot of PvP for my university career. Played a lot of PvP, and I would
College.
I would phase
Yeah.
in and out of Guild Wars. And there was a couple people that I was following. I really liked Jawgis a lot. I
Uh-huh.
watched Jaw like all the time because
Ooh,
I was into PvP and that was his thing, right? So I just
word.
watched just Jaw like all the time. And then I also watched a guy that was like, I can't even remember his name exactly. It was like Shinryuku or something.
Yes, the warrior
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. And I
I
used to
remember
watch
him.
him all the time. And I was there on a stream when he was like, I'm just gonna quit. This is my last stream. And I was like, holy crap, like
Wow.
watch this guy a ton. And then I didn't watch a lot of Guild Wars 2 streams after that. I mean, I think Jaw introduced me to Teapot somehow.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I watched a lot of other games and streams. I really enjoyed watching Creparian and
Mm.
Hearthstone, and I watched a lot of Grubby play Warcraft 3, and I watched a lot of
Okay.
StarCraft 2 stuff.
So very much in the Twitch community. I can hear that loud and clear.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed like watching people that were really good at games do their thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, I want to be good at that, but I know I'll never be
yeah.
quite as good as them, right? Like it's really cool to have like that aspiration and just sort of live through other people.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I recall like if I would every once in a while I would just stream randomly, right? Like just it's not like I streamed once a week even. It was like every few months I would just like pop the stream. And then random people I hadn't seen in years or talked to in years because of my YouTube channel or whatever. They'd like pop in and be like, I remember when I was a teenager and you were a teenager. And we kind of had that shared experience, right? Which
Sure.
was really cool. Then one day, I was about to go to class and I got raided by somebody that had like 150 viewers. And I
Ooh.
was just like so blown away. I almost skipped class. I would have skipped class if I had a presentation that was worth like 40% of my
Oh,
grade.
shit.
So I had to go. I had no choice.
Oh,
But
man, what a moment.
that yeah, and I really wanted to stay because I was like, oh my gosh, like I really used to enjoy this when I was a teen, and like this would be so fun or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just never happened. Like I just kind of let it go or whatever, right? But then
Oh.
fast forward, I graduate, I work a summer job, I start my master's degree.
Mhm.
master's degree, kind of have crazy experience. I could go into that later if I need to, but I have
Yeah, I wanna get into
crazy
that.
experiences. And then COVID hits. COVID
Yes.
hits, and I go, holy crap. And I was super active in like random stuff in my university community. I was president of clubs and honor societies. I'd go to charity events. I helped plan events. I was just like really
Yeah.
involved in
Yeah.
all of these things.
A real
And then it was
extrovert.
all taken away
Uh-huh.
in an instant.
Yeah.
Everything was gone. I had nothing to do. I was so bored. And honestly, it's really depressing. So I was like, I got to do something. And then I just thought, well, what if I've been studying marketing and consumer behavior. And it's like, what if I apply some of these like scientific things and I just go and try to make Twitch a thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like I had this like formal strategy or anything. I just was kind of like, I'm just going to do this for fun. And I want to see if the knowledge that I have means anything or
Yeah.
does anything.
Yeah, just kind of poke at the moment and see if the universe might move a
Yeah.
little for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I started running Drakkar every day and creating this little guild and community around that.
Mhm.
And I had little in jokes and things that we would do and rituals and all the things that I learned in marketing. Again, not that I like sat down and thought, okay, ritual one is going to be, but I just was like cognizant of the fact that if you want to start a community, you need to have things that bind people together and moments.
Yes.
So I really focused on that. And then that led me to meeting Teapot because I posted on the Reddit because somebody debated me hard and said they were going to give infusions to the community. And they had them, by the way. So I
Okay.
posted on Reddit about how this guy was going to do it if we could beat our record. And then Teapot and Diaxon and a bunch of other folks came in and we slaughtered the record by like 3 minutes. So and that was when I was introduced to you can play the game at a higher level and gear matters and stuff.
Yeah.
And then
Hell
that's
yeah,
kind
it
of how
does.
I just got into it, right? I had 3 people, 0 people watching me, 3 people, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, 30 people. I still remember I was like, so when I had like 20 people watching me, I was just so grateful.
Yeah.
So grateful. I thought it was so amazing that anybody would want to share their time with me.
Right.
And I would just express that constantly. And I still feel that way, right? Like I have streams where I have 50 people watching. I have streams where I have 150 people watching. But regardless, I choose not to even really look at the numbers that much anymore
Mhm.
because I'm just grateful that anybody wants to hang out at all.
Mhm.
But that's how I got to this place, I guess.
That's amazing. Wow. And, so the parts of the story that don't surprise me are, like, the little random moments. You're like, "This seemed cool, so I tried it," like, COVID happened, therefore I stream. I think a lot of people did that, right? Me
Yeah.
too, to some extent, by the way. Um, but the part about your story that interests me most right now is the methodical piece of it. Is where you're like, "I have this knowledge about consumer behavior. Let's apply it." I wonder if I could open that up a little bit. Could you tell me a little bit about what that expertise looks like? Maybe what you studied, if you wanna share some of your educational experience, and
Sure.
then how you apply that stuff. This fascinates me, and also, I'm also hoping to learn a thing or 2.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how deep I can go, but like I'll just give a couple examples of things that I did that made sense to me.
Okay.
So symbols have meaning,
Yes. Say
basically.
more.
And so emotes, I would love to do a study on emotes because
Mm.
it fascinates me on Twitch because emotes convey so much meaning,
Yes.
and we probably take that for granted a lot of the time. I mean, we can use that meaning for evil, as we've seen with there's homophobia and racism and things that go on. People hate raid. They use these symbols to try to demean and belittle people. And then we also see the power that a feels good man has,
Yeah.
or we see the power of a hey guys.
Yeah.
These little things that we ascribe a lot of meaning to, right? We hold value,
They're
and
dense.
so I thought, okay, I need a symbol, right?
Hmm.
So one day I'd been streaming for like a month and a half or something, and I had like 15 people watching or whatever. And I said, we need to establish, I actually remember this quite vividly. had like 5 people in the chat, and I was like, we need to establish ourselves as a community.
Hmm.
Like, what are we called? Who are we?
Hmm.
What is this, right?
Yeah. What are we doing here?
And my daughter's nickname is Goose, and the story is that my sister-in-law was like, "Oh, you're like my little Canadian goose," because my wife is American,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so I was like, "Goose, it just fits, right?" So I was like, "Well, what if it was something with geese?" Because we all like my daughter, right? Because my daughter would come in the stream every once in a while, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I thought, what if it's something with geese? And so we like began researching the name for groups of geese, and that's how
Uh-huh.
we came up with the skein gang, because a skein of geese is a group of geese in flight.
Oh, okay.
And something cool about geese is that if a goose is ever hurt or sick, other geese stay back with it, wait till it's good, and then they make a smaller V to catch up to the big V. And
Interesting.
so it's kind of like a no one's left behind in the skein gang, like we're together.
That's
and
nice.
and so goose became our symbol, right?
Mhm.
So I got an emote of a goose, and I just said, look, goose means good. When somebody does something amazing, that's goose. When we raid somebody, that's goose,
We
you
fly
know?
in V. Flying V our way
Yeah,
in.
yeah. And so like I would say, form a V, let's go, right?
Yes.
and and so that became our symbol, and something that people could identify with and that they understood. And then I realized that if you wanted to have the community, you really have to live that, right? And so these were values that were important to me to begin with. But I thought, like, what do we value as a community? What do I value as a content creator? I value helping people. I value kindness and a positive environment, a place where people can make mistakes and sometimes people get mad or whatever,
Mhm.
but we forgive them and we can move past that and we can
Mhm.
help that goose get to the bigger V again.
Mm.
And just re-emphasizing that constantly through then suddenly doing lots of raid training and helping people get into more difficult content and creating statics for raid groups, right? This all sort of developed because of that. So that's one example, right? um well, it's actually kind of a few examples all built into one, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good example. My education background, I actually studied YouTube apology videos, so it's PR and consumer behavior.
What? Is that a joke? Is that a real thing?
No, it's a real thing. I studied YouTube apology videos, so I took a data set of 120 YouTube apology videos, including some from our community, by the
Wait, wait,
way.
wait. So
And
this is like creators who did something dumb and they made a big video like
yep,
apologizing and explaining or asking for
yeah,
forgiveness? Okay. Oh, say more. Okay.
yeah.
I'm curious about this.
Yeah. So my goal with it is I don't know, have you ever heard of Jarvis? Do you know who Jarvis is as a content creator? Big,
It
several
rings a bell.
million followers.
I can't call
He
it up
he did
though.
like Fortnite stuff. He was like
Okay.
16, 17, and he made this video where he was like fly hacking in Fortnite, or like aimbotting or something. Something like that. He's
Yep.
hacking the game.
Yeah.
And obviously, Epic Games immediately bans him for life. He got
Oh.
a permanent ban, and this kid's making millions of dollars off of Fortnite.
Wow.
Permanent ban. And I remember watching the video, and the comments were so polarized. Some people were like, yo, this kid deserves what he got. Fancy getting
Righteous
banned after you
justice.
cheat, right?
Yeah.
And then other people were like, dude, it's just a kid. Like, holy
Mhm.
crap, he's got his whole life ahead of him. He made one dumb mistake, and we're gonna like completely eviscerate him. Like, what? Like, Ninja, obviously popular streamer in Fortnite, came out and said, hey, like, this guy obviously did something stupid, ban him for a few months and then let him back in because he's just a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I looked at that and I thought, why do people think so differently about this?
Yeah.
Why do we have some people that are like, yeah, he should get what he deserves, and then other people that are thinking, well, maybe not. What is it about him that that makes this so polarized? And so what I analyzed was youthfulness. I wanted to see if somebody's perceived youthfulness or their age, right, would impact whether or not somebody forgives them, or like the apology efficacy.
Okay.
So
I buy the
I was
hypothesis.
told, yeah, it was kind of weird because I had all these hypotheses, but like most of them were wrong. Only
Huh.
one was successful.
Huh.
I found that actually people are more likely to forgive adults, which is super interesting. And
Oh,
I theorized a little bit about why that is. Or adults' apologies seem to be more successful. And one rationale I had for that is that there's there's something called the helping paradox, where if you believe that somebody already has the assistance they need, or they're already receiving the justice they deserve, or then you're less likely to help them. So when it comes
hang on.
to
Can you say that one more
analyzing,
time? One more time.
yeah.
The helping
So
paradox.
yeah, helping paradox. I'll just give an example.
Okay.
If I see somebody on, if I see like a kid and they're already like, I don't know, they're like making this big apology for something that they've done wrong or whatever, but they're just a kid. I might think, oh well, like they're just a kid. Why do I need to like accept their apology? Who cares, right? Like
It
they
doesn't
made a
matter.
mistake. It doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah. They have their
So
parents, they have the rest of their lives. They have the
yeah,
support they need because they're a
like
child and dependent in some
yeah.
way.
So it's not, and so what could have happened, this is just the theorizing I did in my thesis. What could have happened is that people saw these people apologizing who they perceived to be teenagers, and they went, oh, well, like, who really cares, right?
Kids
you
fuck
know,
up.
like,
Big news.
yeah, yeah, wow, look, kid makes a mistake.
News at 10.
Tomorrow, like, it's going to happen every day. So it's
Yeah.
just something that they thought probably didn't matter very much.
I buy
So,
that.
yeah, I I don't know. I just that's what I studied, and it was really neat. And
And
yeah,
you were saying that one of your hypotheses actually tested successfully. Was it related to the helping paradox?
no, it was that the amount of responsibility one took would affect apology outcomes, and
Oh, yeah.
so, or sorry, it was the amount of perceived responsibility. So what
Mm,
this meant was if they thought you were like the real cause of what happened, right?
okay.
So the difference, like, here's a good example. You run a red light because the roads are icy,
Mhm.
versus you run a red light because you're driving drunk.
Mm,
Very different contexts here, right?
right.
One, people will ascribe, they'll be like, oh, well, you know what? Like, not really their fault. Roads were icy. They were slamming on the brakes. They went through the red light.
So if they're
Like,
apologizing, then they understand it's not their fault or they should understand it. And if they understand it and they're still apologizing, then it's seemed to be
well, you
disingenuous,
might
which of
still
course turns people off.
apologize, right? But how people perceive or how people rationalize what happened is different. So this is called attribution theory. So as people, when an event happens, we naturally want to rationalize why it happened. We have to give some rationale.
Sure.
So when somebody runs a red light, we want to go why. And so we
Yeah.
can ascribe these things to one of two things: something external to the person, like the icy road, or something internal, like that person is a bad person. They made bad choices.
Yeah. 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 The
So
essence of road
that's
rage.
that difference here. That's that distinction. And so what we found is I hypothesized that when people perceive the person to be, the transgression or the thing that they did wrong to be more internal, then they're going to have, worse apology outcomes. So essentially the drunk driver had worse apology outcomes than the the icy road. That makes sense.
Oh, so they had worse outcomes because
Because people
people.
perceived the reason for it happening to be more about the individual than something else.
That's the
So
opposite of
like,
what I was thinking a second ago. I need a second to think about that.
yeah, think of it like this. If I came and punched somebody in the face
Yes.
because I have like irrational anger and I just
Yes.
like started beating people up, people might be like, Sneb, not the nicest guy, you know? But if I punch somebody in the face because they're trying to hurt my wife, they might think differently about my
Sure,
actions, right?
sure.
They're rationalizing why, and one of those things is Sneb acting out violently
Mhm.
because he has like these issues or whatever, and then the other is Sneb is acting out to defend somebody, right?
Sure.
So they don't view it as a problem with me necessarily.
Are you, familiar with David Foster Wallace by any chance?
Name doesn't ring a bell.
He was an American author, sadly committed suicide. Um, wrote a fiction, wrote fiction, famously one called Infinite Jest, a huge, dense book. But he gave a commencement speech at a university one year. It's kind of famous. It's called "This Is Water," and it's sort of an exhortation um, to see the invisible context around us of things that are happening to people. So you see a person cut you off in traffic, but you don't see the sick child throwing up in the passenger seat. You see the dismissive grocery store clerk who's kind of being a little clippy with you at the checkout line, but you don't see the three customers in front of you who cat called this person or did something really
Yeah.
disrespectful on the way over. So this is water. It's an exhortation to be a fish and notice the water around you. The way that he starts it off is by saying, um, so there's these two fish. There's these two fish, and they're walking down the street, and they run into this older fish, and the older fish says, "Hey, hey, how's the water?" And then the two fish say, "Oh, good, good, great." They move along, and then the two fish turn to each other, and one says to the other, "What the hell is water?" Because they're so
Yeah.
in it that they don't see it, and it's sort of
Yeah.
a call to mindfulness and awareness.
Mhm.
Seems relevant to your,
Yeah, to an
hypothesis.
extent, yes, because if you understand at a deeper level why something's happening, then you're less likely to sort of socially punish this person,
I think this is
right?
a great
Yeah.
transition point for us, Sneb.
Yeah.
Right on that, right on that. Um, so sorry, were you gonna say more?
No, that's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah, so to understand the circumstances and factors that are affecting a person who exhibits some kind of behavior that you may not like, and what do you do about that?
Yeah.
How do you respond to that and take that in? It's hard, and I think that the Guild Wars 2 community shows us this.
Yeah, yeah, at times. No, I think that the Guild Wars 2 community is a great microcosm for life, just the
Okay.
general population. I think that as a society, we have a real problem with talking about things when we disagree,
Mm,
and understanding that you can have friendships with people who may fundamentally disagree with lots of things that you say or do, and that you can still be kind to people even when you have those big differences or disagreements. And that's something that I'm kind of grateful for my education, because it forces you to ask questions, right? I mean, you have big debates with my fellow master students about random stuff, right? And we would have to dig deeper and try to like understand. And at the end of the day, might not we might not even fully understand, um, but we're still friends, right? It's okay to have disagreements or to engage in things differently.
sure.
And the way
Sure.
in which you communicate with people is so important,
Mhm.
so important. And I won't pretend that I'm perfect with this, because I'm certainly not. I'm sure there's lots of video clips of me being not so perfect with this, but I certainly do my best. And I think that's really all you can ask of anybody, is when somebody is doing or saying something that is just so against what you believe or what you think is right, even if you're wrong and you don't know it. How do you respond? What do you do? And
Mhm.
for me, I always I've almost developed this like Socratic method of just constantly asking more questions to try to
Mm.
understand where they come from. I mean, you can even see it on my Twitter. My last post said, "What do you if you could change one thing about Guild Wars 2, what would it be?" And honestly, some of the replies I'm getting are like either impossible or are just bad for the game, in my opinion, right?
Sure.
But if I just go, "Wow, you're stupid. That's a bad thing to do." Like, what a terrible recommendation. Well, that's not really the kind of discourse you want. What I'm doing is I'm saying, "Why do you think that?"
Mm.
Or, okay, like you said you want this, but like, what would you actually do then?
You find a way to
Like,
go a little
just tell me
deeper on it.
more, right?
Yeah,
Tell me
yeah.
more. And the reason I do this is because at some point, the person either tells me more and I understand their perspective, and that's a good thing, or they realize that they don't really have any reason for saying what they're saying.
Mm.
And so they have to reconsider their viewpoint, and their viewpoint might evolve and change in our discussion, and mine will too. And I think that's really positive because I mean, I've done the same thing. People will poke deeper and deeper into my opinion, and then suddenly I go, you know what? I don't know if I'm right about that.
Mhm.
And this is why I was thinking that, but now you've changed my mind. It's the willingness to have your mind changed that's a big deal. And I think that the Guild Wars 2 community would be better off if everyone was just really open to having their mind changed. Not that there's one side that's right or wrong. In fact, quite the contrary. I think that that there's like some kind of even balance in the force, if you will, in
Yeah.
the Guild Wars 2 force that we've yet to attain because everybody is so polarized. It's
Uh-huh.
either you have to play with no armor and weapons, or you have to be Omega Elite Raider. And I just don't
Yes.
think that that's healthy
Yeah,
because
sort
that
of the
also
opposite
is a
extremes.
microcosm for society. You
Yeah.
don't have to be way over here or way over there. You can fall somewhere in the middle and be happy. And as a community, we can have discussions with people who are maybe slightly more this way or slightly more that way on an
Sure.
opinion, and
Yeah.
we can come to some kind of
And people can
compromise.
change over time.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
I have.
absolutely. Like I changed over time. I used to not know anything about the game and just run around and throw grenades everywhere, and I thought it was wicked. And then one day I wanted to try raids, and people kicked me so much that I decided not to try it. Like
Oh,
I
shit.
got people. I actually love this. I get a lot of ridicule and a lot of criticism on Tea Time for basically being like out of touch. But what they
Huh.
don't realize is that I was the guy. When I say things like people don't understand this, I'm actually talking about myself.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yes.
I lived that very thing.
The casual
And
perspective. Yeah.
oh, yeah. And I don't even know if I like the word casual because I
You
don't
know,
think it's
it's
a
not
good
a good word.
descriptor, right?
It's
But
it it's
it's the word that
it's
we
the worst
use,
word
right?
except for every other word.
Yeah, we just it's but it's just the easiest word to say because otherwise you have to say the people that choose
Yeah.
to play in this very particular way, right?
Right, right, right.
Um, it's yeah, it's just so interesting to me the ways in which we communicate. I mean, I've had people say like make huge assumptions about me. I've had people say that for example, that if I, Teapot and I are friends, right? And he'll shoot me a message every once in a while and be like, "Oh, did you see this thing?" Or, "Hey, we should talk about this thing sometime."
Yeah.
And sometimes I will literally be working or something or like doing something, and then I have Teapot on in the background, and he just tells me that we're having like some video time and that we're having an informal tea time right then and there. I swear half of it isn't planned. But anyway, the reason I'm saying this is because people have accused me of being like a total shill, or they're like, they say that I'm so self absorbed that I only am streaming to try to get money or to like boost my
Where's that
ego.
come
And like,
from?
I don't know. It's so interesting to me.
Sounds like you need to
Like,
ask
there's a
some
few times.
questions.
Yeah. And so I actually have. I've been like, why do you think this? They're
Hmm.
like, all of the evidence points to this. And I'm like, what do you
Present
mean?
it.
Yeah. It just gets really awkward. And look, I would be way off base if I came on here and said that I'm some kind of perfect human being, that I don't make mistakes, that I don't get angry or frustrated, or that I don't treat people poorly sometimes or whatever,
Yeah.
because I think we all do. It's amazing to me people's lack of capacity to forgive, or their this actually doesn't surprise me. This next part I'm about to say. People will see like one clip or they'll listen to 20 minutes and they will tell me about my whole life story after that. And
Sure.
I just think it's really interesting as content creators, as a streamer, you're completely vulnerable.
Yeah.
People and I am somebody that has a very very hard time hiding how I feel. Like if I was really upset right now, you would
Mhm.
just know it,
Mhm.
right? If I'm really excited about something, you know it.
Mhm.
It's just it comes with its pros and cons. But So sometimes people see me when I'm having a low day, and
Yeah.
sometimes people see me when I'm having a high day. But it's really odd because you get a lot of flack for random stuff. Like I got destroyed by the Dragons End meta, like people calling me ableist and people, and like that actually really affected me when people were saying that to me because
Let's get into Dragon's Den, because I wanna
yeah,
hear what you're about to say, but, not everyone who listens to me is a Guild Wars 2 aficionado. So let's,
yeah,
like, lay the groundwork real quick. Um,
yeah,
Guild Wars 2 MMORPG, okay? Easy. We all know what an MMORPG is.
yeah.
Uh, End of Dragons expansion for this MMORPG. Dragon's End, a Guild Wars 2 meta event, which is actually somewhat unique in the MMO space. It is an entire zone of the overworld of Guild Wars 2 that is dedicated to a 2-hour sequence of events that occur that the players are responsible for nursing along, which ends in a big conflict against an elder dragon. And you win or you lose. And what makes it interesting, on in the community level, and where I think this is probably going to go, is the fact that it's a lot harder than many Guild Wars 2 players are used to it being. And they made the interesting choice at launch, and then this is softened weeks later. But there was a choice at launch to gate access to one of the back of the box features of End of Dragons, the Siege Turtle, behind the successful completion of this more challenging than normal open world event. And discussion ensued. Is this the best piece of content ever made by ArenaNet? Because it does the thing that Guild Wars 2 uniquely does, and it provides a challenge. It's like kind of something for everybody. Or is it a slap in the face to the Guild Wars 2 faithful who are just here to buy
Mm.
their Black Lion weapons and like do some chill story content, and maybe every once in a while join an open world commander for some boss train or something. What's the real deal? And you jumped into this, Sneb. Um, a bunch of words were flown back and forth. Where did you come at this initially? How did Dragon's End strike you the first time you experienced it?
It was the most fun I'd ever had in the game, ever,
Why?
because it was a challenge. It
Mm,
was so interesting because we had this open world event that couldn't be beaten in one shot.
okay.
The first time I attempted it, I got it to 0.2% and lost to the timer.
That's brutal.
And it was devastating, devastating, right? It hurt a lot, right? We made a bad decision. We went to go uh, for context. There's a number of choices you had to make when you're doing this fight because a tail would spawn, and if you didn't kill the tail, you were doing like 80-90% less damage
Mhm.
to the boss. So you'd have to either split up the group or send the whole group over the tail. And so we made a call in the last like 45 seconds, and we said skip tail. Terrible mistake because
Oh,
our group split. Like we half committed to, and then we panicked and we were like, okay, we got to go get that. We couldn't kill it fast enough. People were dying. We failed, and it stung, right? But it was the most fun I'd ever had because suddenly we had to like strategize and think and come together as a community. And
yes.
suddenly the choices that you made with regards to your stats, your build, your gear, your team composition, organizing boons, all of that was suddenly relevant in an open world context, at least to
Yeah.
some degree.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is fantastic because now people will have a reason to consider what they're doing and how they're working with the people around them.
Mhm.
Like, I love this. This will help so much. And I was going around, I had people leave my Discord for this, what I'm about to say.
Ooh.
I was going around and I was saying, you can do it. I was going around and telling people it's not impossible. This is a puzzle to solve, right? We can come together and we can accomplish this. We can do difficult things. It's not impossible. We just need time. We need to figure this out together. Like I'll help you. I'll do whatever. And I would say things like, "I'm nothing special. Like if I can do it, you can."
Yeah.
And people took offense to that, and people left my Discord. I received some angry messages. People did not like that perspective, and it floored me. I couldn't believe it because I thought what I was saying was like really neutral or like really, I don't know, a really positive thing, because growing up, I
Yeah.
had always been taught like you can do hard things. Like when a trial comes around, when there's something challenging before you, don't fold to it. Don't complain about it. Figure it out. Like let's do this thing, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I got a lot of criticism for that. Some people told me I was ableist. That shook me pretty hard. I took like 5 or 6 days off streaming and stuff because I really did not like that.
Yeah.
Specifically because I have a brother with a very serious disease that has him use a wheelchair for mobility. We have different like slings and medical equipment in my parents' house to get him into the shower and on the toilet and all of these things. And just
You
to
live with that.
suggest that I'm ableist when like I worked
Yeah.
with Make-A-Wish at one of my jobs and helped create accessible playhouses.
What
And
a
I was shook. It
fascinating.
really hurt me. Yeah.
That is an incredible confrontation to grow
Yeah.
up with something like that, to have those experiences and be called ableist. That sounds like it must have
Yeah.
been a shock.
Enough to prompt me to make a YouTube video, which I almost never made YouTube
Yeah,
videos, right?
yeah.
So I made a YouTube video that was just like, what the heck are you all saying? Like, think about this. This is terrible. Let's not
Mm.
divide ourselves. Let's come together. And it was just amazing to me how many people were so angry about this. And I don't know. I wasn't even really sure how to feel or react. I wasn't really sure what to do. It kind of sullied the experience for me quite a
Wow.
bit. It made it so that I wasn't really interested in running the meta that much. And then there was that whole other debacle that happened, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Okay.
uh,
Why what do you think it was that drove people to react negatively to you when you said, "We can do this"?
um, well, what I think it was and what it is are probably two different things. So I want to acknowledge that first. What I thought it was,
Open-mindedness. Let's go.
yeah, what I thought it was, I thought that people just didn't understand that I get this a lot. People think that I'm like some kind of god of the game, that I'm like
Mm.
really, really good, and that I just have some innate ability above what other people have, that I
Because why
know
else would
something
people watch you?
special. What's that?
Because why else would people watch you?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. People just think that I'm like some hero or something. But they don't understand that I knew nothing, right? Like I did exactly the same thing that I'm sure a lot of players do, where they just run around, do the story a little bit, right? I don't know what half my skills did. I didn't know what a break bar was. I didn't know any of this stuff. The game never taught me any of this stuff, so I
Right.
just kind of went and threw grenades at things, and things died, and I got loot, and
Had
I
fun.
was I was happy. I was
Yeah.
having fun, and that's what games are about, having fun. And so I think people didn't understand, and they thought that I was on some kind of pedestal being like, yeah, I'm really good at this and all of
We
you
can
should
do
be
it.
too. Yeah, yeah, like they thought it was just unrealistic maybe. And that's what I thought, but I still don't really understand exactly why people were so. I think people were also really frustrated that they couldn't complete it, and that maybe they took it as a bit of a slap in the face for me to be like, yeah, you can do it. And what,
Mm.
like I've met people that failed it 30 times, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And in my own bias, I'm like, how is that even possible, right? Because
Mm.
if you join like a guild group that's going or semi organized,
If
there's like a 60% win rate now. Like I don't know. Um, but I as I think about that, I can empathize with, they've attempted this every weekend for like months, right? And they're not getting it. And here, this streamer guy who clearly has a bunch of people that are joining his groups that are pretty good at the game and whatever, he's able to clear this nonstop, no problem.
right.
And I can see why that would be maybe a little frustrating.
Sure.
But it's interesting. It just kind of goes
You have
back
an
to the people
advantage.
don't really know the full story, right? And I would venture to say that we often don't know people's full story, and so that's where that communication piece comes in.
Mm.
It's okay to ask some questions and to talk about things, but the vitriol that happens, like I hate you. I am never talking to you again, and leave. Like, it's amazing. People that I'd helped on Discord before, they just immediately reacted never spoke to me about it, just said, "This is evil and bad. I'm gone." And I was just amazed by this. Yeah, I continue to be fascinated with how quickly we can cast somebody aside, or that sort of thing.
Yeah. I have a thought. It might be a little woo woo. Would you permit me a little latitude?
Sure,
Okay.
go.
Well, this division between the people who are excited to go hard and the people who feel um, insulted at the suggestion to do so. Let's think about it that way. Is one I've been singing games for a long time. It's not just a Guild Wars problem, right? I'll drop a specific community in mind that I'm also fairly tightly embroiled with, the PlanetSide 2 community, much smaller. Um, it's an open world MMO first person shooter, so you shoot each other. Also has tanks and planes and crazy like jumping dune buggies off of ramps and all kinds of fun stuff that people love to do. A future sci-fi war is the pitch, the back of the box, and I think that there are. s- I've increasingly started to see these community interactions in a bimodal sense. Um, and I think that let me say this concisely. I see the people who want to get good and want others to get good with them. They want others to be like them as they get good. They see their way as getting good. What they're doing is sort of accepting a community defined social hierarchy of sorts that they can progress along by doing more DPS, by getting more boss kills, by doing more and more crazy kinds of clears of Dragon's End, mono class composition, which I know you've done, things like that. And those are people who, with a competitive mindset, I think may be heavily involved in the interest when they're playing that game of trying to resolve themselves as individuals in the world, in the gaming world. Who am I? Where do I fit? I want to ascend. I want to climb. I want to define myself. And a primary way of doing that is to engage in conflict, right? What's the best way to define yourself? To understand how you differ from everyone else. You engage in conflict that reveals differences. It lets the great rise, and if you're not, you don't. Now, the other sort of mode that I've observed, and I think it's sort of like the sleeping giant in the gaming space, because people who engage in this mode aren't necessarily active in saying what they think, because there is something sort of conflict oriented about saying what you think online. You have to be open to defending what you say and interested in writing things down, which most aren't, I think. Most don't play games in that way. So this other mode that I've observed is not one of trying to resolve in their individual nature in the gaming world. It's trying to resolve the nature of the gaming world onto themselves. It's sort of the opposite direction. And they're interested in different kinds of things. So the amount of damage they do doesn't matter very much because they're not interested in trying to compare themselves against other players in that space. They're maybe interested in experiencing different stories, different characters. Um, they want an experience where they feel immersed with some variety. They want to feel a sense of identity that is based in the world. I'm still trying to think through this, but I think these patterns play out, and I see people like us, Sneb, people who go hard. Okay, I'm a kind of a casual Guild Wars 2 player now, but I go hard in other stuff. That's kind of like my excuse. Um, we don't understand this way of engaging with games very well. This way of accepting the gaming world being put upon us rather than us trying to resolve ourselves within it. And when we see a casual player or someone who says that I don't like that this is challenging me, we say, "How could you not like a challenge? That's ridiculous. This is the chance for you to prove yourself, for you to resolve yourself as an individual. Why would you not wanna do this?" When you're operating within that mode, it makes no sense that you wouldn't want to do that. However, I think there's a different interpretation that I'm starting to grapple with that looks more like, um, when the game presents me a challenge that I can't overcome with the faculties that it's sort of presented that it's encouraged along the way, the world is now in dissonance with me. I'm being rejected. I am being hurt. It's telling me that I don't belong here. And rather than seeing it as a challenge, it's seen as sort of a refutation, a rejection. It's like the disregard of your crush. It's the world saying no. And I think that's a real pain that we all feel in different parts of our lives.
Yeah. We inject a lot of our identity in the things that we do and the possessions that we have.
How could we not?
Um, of course. And so, there's a paper that I'm forgetting the name of now, but basically, this paper, there's some research done where they look at how the objects that we own are a reflection of our identity and that we ascribe a lot of meaning into these things. For example, I'm a big basketball guy.
Sure.
A Kobe Bryant rookie or a Michael Jordan rookie card to me
Mm.
would mean so much more than just this piece of paper with a picture on it, right? And this reflects in the monetary value of these little pieces of paper with a image on it, right? That they mean a lot because people hold memories in these things, and there's nostalgia, and there's just all of this meaning and life experience and childhood that go into these things. And I would love to do research on this too, but I believe that that same thing occurs in an MMORPG
Mhm.
because your character is almost like a possession. It's a reflection of
Definitely.
self identity.
A quite literal reflection.
Yes. And so when sort of as you were saying, right, when you're going around and you're experiencing things, you're essentially you've created your own world. Like there's this sort of sandbox for you, but you instill your own values in this. You build something for yourself. And so when you encounter other people in the world that essentially is yours, right?
Mhm.
Then and they have differing values or opinions. It's hard to like comprehend. It's such a conflict to what you're actually
I
experiencing or
made this
doing.
character to be in concert with the world. Why would they not be? Why would I not be?
Yeah.
It makes no it
Yeah.
seems wrong.
Yeah. And so I mean I also posit that this is the reason that why when balance occurs or when the game isn't going the direction that people want or when whatever, right? When there's issues in the game, it's like an assault on your identity, right?
Mhm.
People perceive it that way, right? Especially in the if you look at like the raiding community, the fact that there are no new raids is so abhorrent to this community, right? Like it like hurts them,
It's
right? And they just
Mhm.
they just keep saying, well, what if? You know, Arena could have done
No.
this, they could have fixed this. What if, what if, what if, right? And they speak very negatively about it and have a very hard time seeing the good in the game because their identity is they are a raider. The entire world that
Yeah.
they've built, the community they built within the game, their characters, everything is surrounded by being able to do the most difficult content in the game.
Yeah.
And when those things don't exist and the challenges and the pushing yourself to the limit, that stuff doesn't happen, it just
Part of you
it like
dies.
hurts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, part of it dies. It's
Yes.
like an attack on your character.
Yes.
So, and I know that might seem like kind of hyperbolic or something, but I
That's
think
true.
there's some truth there, right?
I believe
There's
you.
got to be. I would love to study that, but anyway, I think that this happens more often than we think. And I think we have all of these people that have very differing value sets of what they're looking to get out. Fun is very subjective, and I'm a huge proponent of this. If you're not having fun playing the game, then you're doing it wrong or the game's not for
I
you, right?
hate the word
If you don't
fun.
if you're not having fun raiding, then why are you trying to raid?
Mhm.
Right? Like don't
Mhm.
don't do that. And it's
I hate
funny
the
because
word
people are
fun,
like,
though.
why would the raid trainer say that? But I try to qualify people all the time. When people come into the guild, they want to join a raid group. I just go like, hey, like how into this are you really?
Yeah, yeah,
Because if you're just exploring this, just give it a test. It might not be for you, and that's okay.
sure.
That's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay not to like this content. Just like I I used to love PvP. I don't enjoy it as much as I used to anymore.
Mhm.
It's okay to have preferences and to do different things.
Yeah, and you're just giving people the courtesy of giving them a heads up about what's involved in doing this, really, and letting
Yeah.
people decide for themselves if they're up for it. That's nothing but that's the courtesy that all people who are fluent in that way of playing the game would ideally be able to extend to people who are new to it.
Yeah. I just think we should be more respectful of people's different preferences to play and to have fun. And it's funny because so much conflict in this community comes from that intersection of expectation, where people have differing expectations of what to get out of the game, what to be in a group,
Mhm.
how to act in a group, what the culture is. All of this like combines into creating this hostility and this toxic environment.
And there's this echo
It's actually
chambery thing, right?
yeah,
Where the simple ideas with a strong essence get ping around and they get amplified. And the
yeah,
part and the more nuanced understandings that might be closer to real die because they're hard to spread around. The
yeah.
meme nature of the way we communicate.
Precisely. Like, I think there are very few circumstances where people have been legitimately toxic to me, but the few that have happened are almost always a result of miscommunication and mismanagement of expectations.
Mm.
Almost all of them. And I mean, people yell at each other only because they just won't communicate.
Well, it's
Yeah,
hard. It's a skill.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
something that I don't
It's
hear
really
enough
quite
people
fascinating.
understand is that communicating is hard and it is a skill. It's something that I had to learn to do, you know?
Look, if
It's
somebody on
not
their
easy.
resume told me they were a raid trainer and that they successfully taught 100 people how to raid or something, I would qualify that as very good communication skills, right?
That'll
Like,
that resume line will start working the day that raiders are in hiring manager positions.
yeah.
I look forward to
They are
that
in
day.
some.
Yeah, it's starting to happen,
Yeah.
I think, slowly, slowly. Um,
Yeah.
so the difficulty of communication um and of making room for each other. Like, there's this great sort of quote that I like to try to invoke for myself. Let me see if I can find it. Uh, I don't even know the context of it, but it's so good. Here it is. It's by Baruch Spinoza, a Dutch philosopher from the 17th century. I have labored carefully not to mock, lament, or execrate, but to understand human actions. And I think those of us who are able to do this have a certain probably part a certain sort of inclination, and also we've decided to sacrifice our some time and energy to actually do this. Um, what does it look like? Okay, here's a different way to attack this. Um, Sneb, we've observed that there's division within the community. Yes, we've talked about how this is happening, dimensions of it, the effect of it, what it looks like. Do you believe that it's a problem that we can solve?
Oh, that's a very good question. Little bit of a rabbit hole. Yes and no. It's kind of funny because I think on a few tea times and a few different conversations I've had, I come off as a bit of a doomer for saying this, but I think that there is a point that we can go as a community, and we can hit that threshold, and we can't move much further beyond it. And then from there, it becomes systems within the game and the tools that we have access to.
Uh-huh.
I think we can take ourselves to a certain place, but then we can go no further without the help of systems and tools.
Sure. So a partnership
Yeah.
between the players and the developers, that kind of idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ever despair over the fact that those partnerships can't be more literal? And there has to be such a gulf between the people who make games and the people who play them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really well, yeah, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, right?
Yeah.
And I would include myself in that. I think there was a time where I was very critical of the development of the game and was very angry about a lot of stuff because I invest so much in the game and in the community, right? And so I was so annoyed by like, okay, I'll go off for a second. The Dragon Response missions, when those came out,
Ooh.
I was very upset. I thought they were the worst content the devs had ever created, and I was
So
very
for
vocal about that.
we should explain what
Um,
DRMs are briefly.
yeah,
So when End of Dragon started being worked on, the planned conclusion of the Icebrood Saga episodic content for Guild Wars 2, which was originally pitched as being just as good as an expansion, which it was not. Um, the end of the planned Icebrood Saga arc of content was sort of abbreviated. Let's put it that way. In order to keep players busy, a content model called Dragon Response missions were added to the game, which were interesting in some ways in that they welcomed replayability and cooperative play in a way that most single player content in Guild Wars 2 doesn't seem to or didn't at the time. But also they were fairly thin narratively and in terms of variety. Uh, so that's what those were. Now,
yeah.
give us your
Gameplay wise, they were very weak, and so anybody who was interested in instanced content, they were very poor, right? To put it lightly, they were not very fun. The challenge modes I completed in one try with a random group of people,
Mhm.
with no context. I just went in and we just
Not
did
much meat on
them.
the bone.
Yeah, so there wasn't a lot there, and I was very annoyed by this, and I was very vocal about it. But as I've learned sort of what goes on in the development process, and I won't pretend to be an expert or anything, but as I gain more insight, I gain more empathy.
Yeah.
And that to me is what is really lacking. That gulf is a gulf of empathy,
Mhm.
a lack of empathy and understanding. I think there was a time when I came out and said, "Look, why won't ArenaNet just talk to us?" Because if I knew anything, because I'm sure that as a company, it was horrible for the pandemic. Like having to redo all of your processes and figure things out and work from home and how do you synergize as a team when you're all working at a distance. I'm sure there was a lot going on there,
Yeah.
and I just felt like it was very corporate at times. I think that's changed quite a bit, actually. I think they started making the blog posts where they're like, "Hey, I'm a human, and this is what I do, and this is a story about what I did," and
Yeah, yeah.
those things really were a big deal for me. But yeah, I think it was. I think that gulf exists, and I think it's a gulf of empathy. I think if there was more communication, I think other communities do this pretty well. I think if there was more communication somehow between players and developers and more transparency, not saying they have to show us the books or anything, but if there was more transparency and feedback loops, I think that people would be slightly less harsh. I
Mhm.
think there's a grow there. Well, for a while there's a big sentiment that they just didn't care, right?
Yeah.
They don't care. And it's funny because to work in games, you have to care a whole lot.
No shit.
That's the sick irony, right? Is
Absolutely.
you imagine the people that you're serving where you might be in a role that's slightly underpaid for your skill set.
Or a lot.
You're just really passionate about games.
Mhm.
And the very people that you're making these games for are saying you don't care. Oof. That how insulting must that be, right?
Mhm.
And so I actually try to quell those conversations because I think it's really unfair. I've spoken to a few developers and things, and
Mhm.
they care a whole lot. Now, what they can and can't do because of scope or resources or whatever, totally another story. But saying that they don't care, oh, like they would not be working in the role that they're working if they didn't care.
Yeah, and
So
suggesting that those people don't care is reflects a really gross misunderstanding of what a game
yeah,
developer is and does, and how games are made. Um, but it's one of those memes that you see tossed around, Discord communities and stuff like that. Lazy developers, right? That's one of the big ones. That's a big part of the reason why I interview game developers myself and talk to some of the folks that are reading it, because I think that the gulf and understanding of what the people who make the games do and how they approach it and how we experience those things is way bigger than it needs to be. And it's mostly got to do with like uh just from what I can tell, it's just the difficulty of creating something and the necessity for privacy and secrecy in order to deliver on it successfully. Not just because of, corporate ass covering, but just because any creative thing has to start small and get bigger. And there's an appropriate time to loop in everybody. Um, Sneb, I wonder, what was there like an experience you had that sort of pricked your awareness and you had been like, "Oh, game devs are people. I should stop bragging on DRMs." Like what was it that got you to change your mind about that approach?
Dude, I don't know if there was like a moment, right? Typically there are like these like aha moments when it comes to these things, but I
Uh-huh.
think it was sort of a collection of moments for me.
Mm,
I I had spoken informally, right, just in the game or
yeah.
whatever, right, with people like Darkbringer, with people like Grouch, with people like
Yeah.
Chelsea, who designed the legendary weapons, extremely talented.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Solar, who has designed several of the elite specs, right?
Mhm.
And does some balancing, or is it balancing? Maybe I'm probably wrong about that. But anyway, I had spoken about or spoken to a lot of these folks, and I was just like, they're just humans, right? They're
Yeah.
gonna make mistakes and stuff. The game isn't some kind of like immortal like I don't know. It just kind of happened, right? Um, I think also part of it is, I mean, when I was tweeting anger and vitriol, right? I was unhappy, right? Not that wasn't really me.
Mm,
And I think I was projecting my own feelings at the time onto something else because I was unhappy with my escape, right? The
interesting.
game was sort of an escape during a hard time for me, and the game wasn't going in a direction that I approved of at the time, right? And so I was mad, and I was taking out all my own insecurities on others. And so as I sort of evolved out of that, I realized, how childish that is, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference between being critical of something and, saying, hey, this is a problem. How do we solve it? And saying, like, I hate everything. Everybody should be punished because they're bad, right? Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
totally different.
Mhm.
And so I drifted away from being like just angry and just saying mean things to, hey, like, there's some problems with the game, but it's still a good game. And the people that
Mhm.
make it are very talented. And these
Mhm.
are the problems, and this is how I would solve them.
Interesting. You know, I think you've just explained, if I may be so bold, exactly why some of those people that you were close to or were with your community pieced out when you said, "We can do this together." That sounds exactly like what happened to those people, that they were used to getting something out of the Guild Wars experience. For some reason, something didn't give it to them. This felt like this was a hurt. This was damage to their identity. And in their hurt, they lashed out to hurt others. You against ArenaNet and they against you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good analysis. I think this sort of thing happens a lot more than we'd like to even think. It's uh it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
It absolutely is. So we've talked about okay, so we were talking about the nature of our relationship with developers and how getting to know them deepens the picture. Helps us understand like maybe why things don't go right and see the human side of the problem. Uh, what So I think that you've been pretty clear about what we on the gamer side of things can do to improve it. we can learn to be open-minded, extend empathy, extend curiosity. I think that's a good way of putting it too. Of opinions that don't agree with you. Um, Find the internal resources wherever they may be to unattach yourself to parts of your identity that might be getting assaulted. Attach to something higher, and just accept being questioned a little bit. That could be difficult. But I wonder. I heard you say a little bit ago, Sneb, that you really appreciate what Arena has been doing for the last, I guess, about a year or so, since like June or July last year, where they've been putting a human face on what they're doing and being more communicative with us. What do you think it is that ArenaNet and studios like them can be doing or should be doing in order to close this gap?
This is so tricky. I've thought a lot about this actually. So I'm very conflicted because I think on one hand, this is for many of them, it's a job, right? This is their career. This is how they make money and support their family. And do they really want everybody to be in their business all the time? Do they really want to be a face, right? Some people don't. They don't want to be in the
Mhm,
spotlight. They don't want to be on live streams. They don't want to write blogs. They don't want people to know their name. They just want to do their job, do it well,
mhm.
go home and hug their kids. And I respect that. So it's difficult for me to go and say what I'm about to say
Okay,
because
let's hear it.
I don't think that people should be forced into this situation either. But being more present,
Mm,
right? When I'm in Eye of the North and I see Chelsea on her character, and I go, Chelsea, I loved the legendary weapons that you made. And people are like, who's Chelsea? What are you talking about? Right?
mm.
They just don't know, right? That this is, and then people run up and like say, balance PvP to
No,
her, and she's like, I literally do art. I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Like
Fix Dragon's
it's just
End.
yeah, fix Dragon's End. Just like I don't even know how, right? It's
What's
just
Dragon's End?
really kind of knowing the people behind the counter is kind of a cool thing. It humanizes it a lot. Just other studios, what I've seen is they'll do like a weekly live stream and they'll bring a different person on and they'll
Yeah,
talk about what they do and they'll do Q&As and
I see Warframe do
do
stuff
all
like
those sorts of
this.
things.
Digital
But they do
studio.
them slightly more informally. I don't even know. I'm sort of just spitballing here a little bit. I don't
Yeah.
know how to describe this, but perhaps my biggest criticism of a lot of the community interaction that we have from the Guild Wars 2 team is a lot of it is very corporate.
Mm,
If does that maybe that doesn't quite. I'll try to describe what I mean.
please do.
Um, a lot of their social media, what I see is just a lot of advertising the gem store sales, or a lot of just like the recent update is here. Click to view the blog, or click to. There's very little humanness behind that,
Sure.
and it's just not how social media right now values authenticity a lot. A lot.
Mhm.
They really value it.
That's what it screens for. Mhm.
Yeah. And so it's very strange at times because I feel like I don't know who's behind the Twitter. I don't know who's behind a lot of these things. There's glimmers, there's parts where I do see it, right? The blog posts, love those.
Mhm.
Perfect example, right? Human, very human. People saying that they made mistakes, people saying what they like and don't like about what's going on, right? Little behind the scenes. Those are brilliant, brilliant. But there's a lot when I see those credits roll at the end of Dragons, I'm like, holy crap, a lot of people worked on this, right? But I had
Yeah.
no idea who like any of them were,
Yeah.
which is very odd. You know,
Mhm.
it felt very odd. There's
It's
seemingly
strange to
this
meet these
rift.
people only at the very end.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have liked to meet them along the journey, you know?
Right. Right.
And it's funny because then there are some people that are like leaving the company or whatever, and me being maybe a little bit more involved, I kind of like know what they did,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of people wouldn't.
Mhm.
I think I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally off here, but I think that's kind of sad. Like I I think it's kind of cool that these people made something amazing, and
Right.
I wish I knew the minds behind this masterpiece better.
Yeah.
But how do you do that, right? I mean, it's creepy if I go and I'm like on their personal Twitters or something, right? I'm not going to do that. Um, but I don't really know how you facilitate that other than things like live streams, play with the devs, and they've done those sorts of things before.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They
I
always
would
seem a
love it
little
if there
too
was much more
polished,
consistent.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Like, look, I just want to see some dev from his house playing World versus World
Yeah.
and people
I wanna see him getting
donating to a
steamrolled and
charity so
getting
that he'll
pissed.
play Core Ellie. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't know.
You you wanna squeeze them so they have a human emotion.
Yeah, I wish they would just tell me more about them. Not
Yeah.
that they I again, it's this weird balance because I don't want to be like, yeah, tell me your whole life story and don't dox yourself or whatever, right? Like you
Yeah.
should feel safe going to work and whatever. But there's got to be this tender balance of like, how do I get to know the dev as the human, right?
Mhm.
And like I'd love to hear those little stories more, right? Like, we named this character after this person because, right?
Mhm.
Or we did this because. I
Mhm.
feel like there's a lot of this like lore, right? That's kind of lost because maybe there's this like inner circle that know about it. Like the devs all know that they're doing these things in tribute to people and they're,
Yeah.
you know, but like we find out about it much later, or maybe we don't find out about it or don't really fully understand the story. It's how do you
Mhm.
express the humanness in the game and that process to the people that are experiencing it,
Yeah.
without burning out your employees, because you really don't want your employees to feel like
Yes.
they have to share too much or that they have to go way above what the scope of their job is. I think that would be not good. But maybe what the real answer to this is that there's not really a dedicated community person. And typically the community person is that humanness of the company, right?
Mm.
I or there's like a collection of people that are. I always use RuneScape as an example because I think RuneScape does it pretty well. They have like these mods are like, I don't know, they're just funny and witty and they're
Huh.
communicating all the time, but they have people dedicated to, getting information, talking to the community, collecting feedback. We don't see that in like a very transparent way with ArenaNet. Like I've never seen they send out like private surveys and stuff. I'd love to see more of that just be public, right? I want the data. Show me the data. I think there'd be less complaining. Well, I think that the complaining would be different if
Yeah.
if things like, did you enjoy Dragon's End? Yes or no? And they had like polls and we saw the stats. Like, do you think Dragon's End is too hard? Like
Never
where
in
do
a
the
million
numbers really
years.
lie? Is it a vocal minority? Is it like what
Never
is
in a
this,
million
right?
years.
I would love to know because at times it
Yeah.
feels like the community is like this separate bubble entity over here, and then ArenaNet's like over here, and there's like this people just kind of shooting arrows at this. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it's actually like I kinda have this weird image in my head where I feel like the whole community of creators and people who are very active in forming the community discussion and community memes and behaviors is about the same size as the number of people who are actually making Guild Wars 2. It feels like
Yeah.
it's about the same number of people, and, probably it's not exactly the same, but and then in between them is this big invisible behemoth of everyone who plays Guild Wars 2 without ever thinking about what the developers are like and without ever checking a YouTube video about it. And those are most of the people who play the game. And for them, they see a credit screen come up, and they're just like, "Ah, this is annoying to me. This is annoying to me." I mean, maybe they think that. I don't know. Um,
I bet there are plenty of people that don't care about what I said at all, right? Maybe it's just because I'm really invested, and I have to acknowledge that too. I I don't know. I think
well,
there's a
it's a
culture
deep
around
part of
that.
your identity. You
Yeah, yeah.
voluntarily
I mean,
made it a big part of your identity. So of
yeah. I mean,
course,
look at the room I'm in. Like,
yes, yes,
there's a lot of art and things. Like,
yeah,
I really love the game and I really love the community. I actually don't think I would have stuck around in the game if it weren't for the community, though. I
hmm
think the community is what's always drawn me back.
mm.
It's a beautiful thing, I guess.
It is. It really is. It's a real privilege too, because I remember, like, gaming in the late '90s, early 2000s, like, really the very start of people actually using computers to play games together, at any kind of a level, and how painful it was to connect with people, how painful it was to maintain communities. I played, Team Fortress Classic, which was the Team Fortress in iteration between the first one with Quake and Team Fortress 2, and, it was a Half-Life 1 mod, so it came out in, 1999, I think. And we used, like, IRC. We used Roger Wilco. I don't even know people have ever heard what Roger Wilco is. It's a primordial voice communication app. And ICQ. Who's heard of ICQ these days? Not many people. Old school instant messenger client. In order to communicate and talk to people, they didn't have tools like Twitch or Discord. I feel so privileged, actually, to be living through a time where all the things that I wanted to do when I was, in my early 20s, growing up at that part of my life, and I love those things, but there was no clear way to manifest them without becoming a game developer. Now we can do stuff like this. We can make our communities, we can join communities because we have all this amazing technology and connectivity around us. I think it's so cool. It's a huge
Yeah, it's
responsibility
incredible.
too.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely incredible though. I remember, I mean, when I was in middle school, you get teased for being the like nerdy kid or whatever, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I just think, you're not alone, right? There's so many people, there's so many niche communities. People have this very particular preference for this one book series or what. You can find your clan, you can find your guild, your group, your
Yeah.
people, right? How affirming is that, or how powerful is that, that we can go out and just find. I mean, I've made friends from all over the world because of this silly little game, right?
Yeah.
It's just a game. It's just a game that we enjoy playing together.
Yeah.
And people are telling. I talk to people almost every day that I just met playing this game, and we talk about our families and how somebody might be graduating their program or and finding a
Right.
job, and somebody's now becoming a lawyer, and somebody's getting married and having a kid, and it's amazing that this is what brings us together.
Mhm.
This game,
Yes.
and we're very lucky to live in a time where you might live in some small town in the middle of nowhere and everybody else is playing football. You like Guild Wars too. You know what? You've got your people.
Yeah.
People are there for you.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's amazing, especially for someone like me. Like, I'm more of an introvert. I'm not the kind of guy to join a bunch of clubs. So I am grateful that this thing that I already enjoyed ended up becoming this thing that you can connect people over. So cool. So cool. And it's so cool that we have a whole industry that is thriving around creating these experiences and competing for our attention to try to get it. Um, yeah. Would it be okay with you, Stem, if I went back like half a leg in our conversation to
Sure. Yeah.
you or I just realized there's a branch I wanted to go down, but there are too many branches, so I had to pick one. I'm picking the other one.
Yeah.
Um, and it's about the accessibility of the human part of the equation for people making the games and what you want to see from them. The squeeze them so they have a human emotion, that kind of idea. I have the sense that there is an awareness that this is needed from developers. And I have this from actually talking to them one on one and doing some interviews and some conversations offline. Um, and I also have this sense just from when I do see a too corporate sort of presentation where they're trying to do that, but also in the way that sort of fits this business model and this way of making media that protects all the people who need to be protected along the way. Um, like I think of remember in like the lead at the end of Dragons, there was the moment with the cat in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, that was a real human moment where, like, "Here, look at this cat." "Oh, just kidding, it's dead." And then it becomes a meme, but it was a meme not because of the cat, but because of the reaction to the cat. Like, the human in the room was the one who was what everyone was connecting with when that happened. there's an awareness that that's needed. And I do see some, heroic devs step up and talk a little bit about this on social media. One of my favorite, like, kind of insights that I saw shared, um, because for me, what was gobsmacking to me about End of Dragons, as someone who's become a more casual player over time, was how they actually made a character-driven story, which I think Guild Wars 2 has always struggled with, and maybe we could even say sucked at. Um, Gave us reasons to, care about characters like Marjorie and Casimir, made a very interesting villain character. Um, that stands as a much deeper example of, the insane genius meme. But I saw Morgan Lockhart, who works at ArenaNet. Um, I think she's on the narrative team, or maybe she worked at
Recently
ArenaNet.
left.
Did she
Yeah.
recently leave? Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people who left the studio after the expansion.
Yeah,
Kind of
it's
thing that just
hard to keep
happens.
track.
Yeah, yeah, it just happens. But anyway, I think it was her, and I sorry if I'm misremembering this, but I think it was her shared an insight about writing End of Dragons in a way that what she did was she sent all the characters to therapy, which I thought was really interesting. Um, and it describes an interest in making sure that there's an understanding of the interior lives of these characters. And I just know, because of the nature of the way people work, that a desire to do that is usually a projection of a desire for oneself. This is a person who deeply cares about having their interior life understood. And um, I thought that was a really cool insight to have shared.
Yeah. I had this thought as you were sharing that,
Yeah.
and I wonder if I'm too critical when I say, I need to know the human in them, because I think that as artists, because that's what they are,
Yes.
I think that as artists, they share themselves with us constantly. And that must be exhausting,
Yep.
right? Because they are injecting themselves and their soul into what they're producing all the time.
Right.
What's interesting about that is that we know them in so many different ways that we don't really know them, if that makes sense. So maybe
Yeah.
that's where I'm losing, right? That
We know
makes
the
I
part
feel
of
like what
them
I'm
that they
saying
leave
doesn't
in
really
the
make
art.
any sense, but
No, dude, I
it's
love
just
this. Go with it.
I feel like they that I feel who they are in the story and in the gameplay, and like, look, Cameron designed all these encounters.
Yeah.
I get a sense of what Cameron is like. Not
Yeah.
perfectly, right? But I'm like, hey, Cameron really enjoys this stuff. Like, he must, because he designed some really cool encounters and he
Yeah.
wanted them to, be somewhat challenging. He found a pretty good balance, And so in a sense, there are pieces of them, right? There are pieces of them
Mhm.
all strewn throughout the game because they have to inject themselves in their work
Mhm.
all the time. And maybe in some roles more than others. I don't know. So it's interesting because they reflect on what I said, saying things like, "Well, we need to see the human." They probably feel like they're already doing that, right? To some extent, because they are, right? They are, and maybe this is a question of like how maybe this is why lack of like a very front facing community manager figure or whatever from the company. Maybe this is the gap, right? This stuff is all happening. It just needs to be put on display more, right?
Mhm.
And that's it's kind of a cool thought that I had as you were mentioning that,
I l Yeah. Go ahead.
because you're right, right? Like that's what she's doing. She's showing who she is through the characters and what she values and cares about, and I think that's really neat. But I think that's missed because it's not
Mhm.
communicated very well, right? It's like it's weird because it is, but it isn't. It's in the game and like you understand these values and the story. You don't know where it's coming from, the
Yeah.
origin. Like you don't really understand that it's like next layer or level to it.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
You know what I think about when I reflect on that? Um, I think about I think about the change that we saw as a Guild Wars community back in 2016, um, when we started seeing the Living World Season 3 content come into the game. And we started this run of, gosh, it was almost 3 years, I think. Almost 3-year run where we saw a new Guild Wars 2 release every 2 to 3 months, like clockwork. Some were better, some were worse, but it included a whole expansion, Path of Fire, and it finished up with that amazing Kralkatorrik arc. And one of the things that really marked that period was a drastic reduction in the communication from the studio, from ArenaNet. We stopped hearing from them. And in fact, I think if I remember right, Mike O'Brien, who was president at the time and stepped into the game director role when Colin Johansson left, um, I think he might have even said that this is a deliberate choice that we're going to speak with our art. And I remember reflecting asking myself at the time, is this going to work? Like, is this going to satisfy people? And I think for the most part, it did. I think when the media is being produced in a way that is in line with or exceeding the expectations of the audience, that we don't necessarily need an explanation. It does speak for itself. And maybe the need for explanation is a sort of a response to being hurt. That part of yourself that feels in conflict with the world when something doesn't go the way you want it to. One thing about that period I do remember distinctly was watching um, all the non-raiders of Guild Wars 2 despairing over the period of like that was like 6 or 7 months probably, where we were seeing raid wings being released into Guild Wars 2 and nothing else. It's like, what the fuck, ArenaNet? How dare you? How dare you? This was supposed to be my game, not these asshole raiders. They're supposed to be playing World of Warcraft or something. Um, I remember watching that, and they needed an explanation of why this was happening. And maybe the human angle is necessary to sort of cover the gaps between what people expect and what they get. Um,
Yeah, I mean, that's the job of somebody in PR community management. It's tempering expectations and controlling those things so that everything goes right, basically.
how
Right?
impossible of
Even
a
when you
job is that, though?
know, what's
Sorry, go
that?
on. How impossible of a job is that, though?
Oh,
You
it's
have
very
to
hard.
you have
Yeah.
to understand the different parts of your community, what they want, what they expect, and how what's coming in matches up with that. And what
Mhm.
we see in the game, what is behind the scene looks nothing like what we actually get into the game until maybe days or weeks before the release. So how can you actually get ahead of these problems ever?
Yeah, it's very tricky, right? It's about constant communication and feedback. And in general, fun fact, fun research fact.
Hmm,
Um, the number one reason why salespeople fail. So I promise this is relevant because
please.
they're selling their game to you and their choices all of the time.
Yep.
The number one reason why salespeople fail is inability to listen and empathize.
Hmm,
And so if a person feels like they're not being heard, they're less likely to buy or to invest in or to engage with, right?
sure.
Translating that a little bit, but for the most part, that's it, right? If people feel like they're being heard and understood, then you'll have buy-in from them.
Hmm.
And that's where I feel like that period that you're describing was really lacking, right?
Hmm.
There were people screaming in the streets saying, "Please listen to me. Like acknowledge these problems. Just say anything." And it was just silent, radio silence, right? I mean, the probably the most potent one was right before, and I still can't believe that they didn't say anything about this. Not telling us the release date until it was too late for people to take time off work. Couldn't believe that. I
That was
mean, maybe
weird.
that sounds so petty and like I don't know, but I just was so shocked by that because I thought that they would 100% give people enough notice so they could take time off to play the game that they love with the friends and the community that they've built. But lots of people couldn't because it just waited too long. But they never said anything. They never acknowledged it. I mean, there were countless Reddit posts, people on Twitter, on everywhere, just saying, "Please, like, hear us." And we never got anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. Um,
Like, I wonder why, right? And here's my view is that if they just told me why, I respect it. But they never, they like, it's almost like
exactly. Exactly.
it's
That's
like a
the
respect thing, right? Like it's like they did. It feels like the perception could be that they didn't care again, right? And you don't want
yes.
because, but they
They
do
don't.
care a lot, right?
But if they care in their minds but not in their actions, are they actually do they actually care?
Um, I, well, maybe not. I guess it's the actions or choices of a few people though that then get construed to everyone at the
Yes.
company. And
Yes.
that's problematic to me, right? Like people are going up to Chelsea who makes incredible artwork and all of and does such a good job. And then they're saying that it's her fault that they could get right. Like that's what's happening. That people paint the whole picture. So it's very, very interesting to me. I wish that I understood. Because to me it seems like if they just said, "Hey, being upfront with you, super, if somebody just went on the Reddit and was like, "Hey, you're our most loyal
Yeah.
fans, you're here
Yeah.
every day. We're just gonna be straight up with you.
Mhm.
We um are debating like 3 different days right now.
Mhm.
So that's why we haven't announced the date because we can't yet because we aren't 100% certain." I think that's extremely vulnerable though, like extremely vulnerable. And if they did
It's
that, I think
confusing.
that yeah, the
It
corporate
creates
side
confusion.
I
Yeah.
think would not be good. Like they'd view that
Yeah.
as a weakness. Yeah, so I think that's the issue with that. But I mean, really depends on how you spin it, right? How do
Yeah.
you say it so that it comes off as a very positive thing?
Yeah, I'm actually sympathetic with their choice. I think we can strongly infer the reason this happened is something to do with the likelihood of them actually hitting what they did forecast, which was February 2022. That was in the mix, I think. I think that had been announced as at the end of 2021 at some point. So we knew that, but my intuition, and this is based on just seeing some, you know, some um, self awareness shown by the studio and follow up communication, like talking about how the studio needed to take a little bit of a break to recover from End of Dragons,
Yeah, I'm
and
glad they did that by the way. Really good
yeah,
self-awareness.
definitely, and say it. Glad they said it. Great
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah,
But
I
that,
think that showed a lot of courage. I really respected that.
yeah, me too. That to me suggests that this was a hell ride to get out. And there was a really good chance that they were gonna miss that February date. And I think that it does hazard to to any game when you can create a headline to say that something's been delayed, and that already happened once, right? I
Yeah.
think
I
we're
think
talking
they were
about
too afraid to delay it again. And I
and
mean, justifiably so, right?
justifiably, right? And so the risk is, if we're honest, then our people who already love us will love us a little more, you know? Like the converted, the acolytes, the yous and me's will appreciate that. But if we do that, we run the risk of confusing a bunch of people who don't know us very much. And and setting a narrative with people who were trying to get interested that that our word isn't to be trusted. And that I think is something that to to just further underline that that's a narrative that the community's been talking about for years.
Yeah, they couldn't afford to make that mistake again. Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. They could not afford to miss that date. If they did, oof. I mean, I there are so many things that I can think of that they promised and then way under delivered or just didn't do.
Mhm.
Um, and that has really affected a lot of sentiment about the game and around the game, right? You
Mhm.
hear the same things from people that haven't played in years that they'll just say, "Oh, it's a dead game because XYZ."
Yeah, yeah.
And that's not good. Word of mouth in gaming is huge.
Yep.
Look at, I mean, totally different genre of game, but look at something like Among Us, right?
Mhm,
It's like two people that made that game or something.
mhm,
Sat dormant for years, exploded one day because everyone was talking about how fun it was.
mhm.
I mean, that's but when somebody talks about Guild Wars 2, it's, oh, that game does X, or there's always this negative
That's that
sentiment.
dead MMO that everyone
Yeah,
thought was gonna be the
it's not
salvation of
healthy.
the industry, but ended up just being another eh.
Yeah, and
And
there's a
and
lot of people really trying to change that. A lot of content creators really try to change that narrative. But when things like you go on stage, I vividly remember this because I was the IBS announcement. I was in my master's orientation with my laptop and had I was so excited. I had the little thing on my screen
yeah.
and they said alliances are coming. For like this is like the third time or something they've said this, right? And then they proceed to show like merch for the next 30 minutes.
And,
I
like,
remember I
concept
was
art,
like,
the dude with the cape.
yeah, I remember when they said alliances are coming again. I was like, I don't believe you.
Mm,
I
I
don't.
don't believe you.
Because
That's it.
as an expert in apology videos, uh, because what we find is that every time you make a transgression, a similar transgression, or you do something wrong, just like last time, apology FSC goes boo, 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 boo,
Yes.
right? Like it,
Yes.
if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, eventually people don't feel sorry for you anymore.
Right.
So like as soon as they said that, I said, I don't believe them. When they announced it last time, I was like, I don't think they're getting this out anytime soon. Not with EOD. And that sounds really doomer and evil and whatever,
I was right
but
there with
the
you.
yeah, and like I love the game, right?
Yeah.
But when they talk about alliances now, I don't believe anything they say
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the history has shown me that it's not going to happen. Do I believe that it's going to happen? They're making progress on it. I think the blog posts have helped a lot with that, where they're really
Sure.
transparent about problems that they're fixing and things.
Right.
For a long time, they just would be like, "Boom, it's gonna happen," and then it just doesn't. They just go silent, right?
Bro.
And
Yes.
that's a very political thing to do. Like politicians do that. They make a mistake and they just say nothing about it until they absolutely have to, right?
Yeah.
So
Or until there's good news to report.
yeah. So it's I don't know. It's interesting to me that that sentiment exists and how do they fight that? And I believe I saw Grouch talk about that, or was it just informally in a Twitch chat or something? Grouch was there. I swear
Mhm.
he mentioned, trying to change people's perceptions of the game.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually believe End of Dragons did a pretty good job, right? People were pretty excited about End of Dragons. I think the
Yes.
community had like a lot of eagerness and they were fun and people were praising. I mean, I praised the crap out of the game and I still do. I think End
Yeah.
of Dragons was fantastic.
Yeah,
There
best
are like
expansion.
little things here and
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I think it's probably the best expansion they made. There are little things like my top three criticisms would probably be that some of the elite specializations are a little bit lackluster relative to their Path of Fire
Yeah,
counters.
those are
And
all
then
very explosive by comparison. Balance
yeah, right.
issues.
Like,
Anyway.
yes. So I think it just feels a little bit weird, but
Yeah.
I think they've tweaked that quite a bit with balance already, and that things are getting better. And then the reward systems are a little bit meh. Uh, and then I mean that's honestly those are the biggest things for me.
Right. Right.
I don't know,
And those
but
are like the complaints of the daily the everyday Guild Wars players. People,
yeah,
the huge majority of people who just kind of cruise in for expansions, they never see those
yeah.
problems.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the from the PvP and world versus world lens, I guess the big criticism is they got nothing out of it. So they didn't get
Yeah.
like a new map, or they didn't, there's nothing there for them. So
Right.
I'm also a little bit
I sympathize with that.
empathetic towards them.
Yeah.
I get it, right? Even though that's not my content of choice, I get why, there's some hostility there. But
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've heard
eh,
a reading that continually trumpet the idea of 3 sort of game modes, all equal in importance. Like, that's something they really have always wanted to manifest, but
so hard
their
to do that.
actions have never seemed to back it up.
Well, slight disagree. I think at the
Ooh,
beginning of the game, they really did, but there was a consequence to that, and the consequence was they absolutely destroyed all of their employees. Like, there's no way that producing content at that cadence was ever going to be
talking
sustainable.
about season 1?
I'm just talking about like the first year and a half of the game or first 2 years
After it
of the
was
game in
released?
general.
Yeah, okay.
Like, look, they were trying to do esports. They were trying to make Guild Wars 2 an esport while releasing living world content that was one-time deliverable like every few weeks. And then they were also trying to have this world versus world thing that started out as an afterthought anyway.
Mhm,
Meanwhile, they suddenly are going to make an expansion with raids when that was never in the books to begin with. Like,
mhm.
and then they released fractals and they had to maintain that. And if you look at Guild Wars 2, if I try to go to somebody and say, I want to play Guild Wars 2, and they go, yeah, but I like instance content. You tell me about the instance content in Guild Wars 2. What do you say? Like, how do you even describe this?
You say it's
Well, there are
complicated.
dungeons, but there are also strike missions. There's also these dragon response missions. Oh, but there's two kinds of strike missions. There's like the ones from Icebrood Saga, and then there's the ones from End of Dragons. You have to have the expansion of the End of Dragons ones, but you got to buy that. Like, this goes on forever. There's also raids, but you need the expansions to do raids. Fractals you can do on a core account. What are fractals? Fractals are like dungeons, but they're not quite dungeons. What are dragon response missions? Oh, they're like dungeons and fractals, but they're not quite either. Like, these it's very confusing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Fractals, you need agony resistance. What's agony resistance? Well, it's
Oh my
only
god.
in fractals. You have to have it
I
on
hate
every
that
character.
system.
You have to have ascended armor. Oh, so I need ascended armor for everything? Actually, you don't. You only need exotic armor for like literally everything else in the game. Like, this is complicated,
Yeah,
and I think what, and this is me just theorizing, right? So I don't know. I think that they they just kept increasing the scope of the game, and they had scope creep. So it just kept getting more and more and more and more and more and more, and then to maintain all of it, it became too much. So instead, they had to underwater and underfeed everything.
yeah.
And then eventually something had to go and PvP died. Right? Like, that's
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
just think that's my analysis. Like, um eventually it was no longer sustainable. Um because how do you do that? Like, I'm actually amazed they did it for so long, right? They did the
yeah,
Karka event, like season 1 stuff. Like,
yeah.
it was just so much work
Right.
for, and then it was a one-off every time.
Right. The hubris,
Like,
honestly,
yeah.
of that way of doing content. It was hubristic. There's no other way to put it. That I also think about like other MMOs and how they do this, and they sort of have an organic way to solve some of these problems where they age out content. You aren't meant to be playing content from 3, 4, 5 years ago. Now, Guild Wars 2 made this again hubristic promise. Content never becoming irrelevant, which is actually sort of true. It's sort of
Yeah,
true.
they actually, to be fair, I feel like they do a decent job at that.
That but what people don't understand necessarily, or what's not clear in that bargain, is that there's sort of like a that's the sword that cuts two ways. Because everything is relevant, which sort of means nothing is.
Yeah. Yep. When you try to do everything, you actually do nothing. When you try to please everyone, you please no one. It's actually one of the biggest things in sales and marketing is, if you try to appeal to every demographic, you will appeal to not a single demographic.
Mm,
That's a big problem, which is why I think we've seen Guild Wars 2 go through these cycles, right? Where it's like it's feels like in some ways that they were trying to find who their people are for a long time, right? And then eventually they kind of found them and they just sort of ran with that.
yeah.
But some people weren't happy with that because they had been delivered the stuff that they loved. And then suddenly they just got no more of it. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. They got left
Like going to
behind.
a restaurant and ordering this food and you're like, oh, it's so good. And then you come back next time, like, sorry, we don't have that anymore.
That's right. No more hamburgers on the menu. Sorry.
It's done.
Only pizza. Yeah, man. That's a tough one. Well, Sneb, this has been an awesome conversation, man. I want to respect your time. What are you up to? What do you want to promote?
Well, I do my Twitch thing. I've also been making a few YouTube videos every now and then. And I'm pretty active on Twitter, so it's slash Snebzor, Snebzor. Very Canadian of me to say Z. And I'm there. I like to talk about the game. I like helping people get into the more difficult content in the game and just building relationships and friendships. Everybody on my Discord is a friend. Everybody in the stream is a friend. We just have a good time and we like to bring new people into the fold. There's oftentimes a lot of new folks, and we help them decide what their first character is going to be, where they're going to go, what they're going to do, how they get their
Cool,
armor, and we just really enjoy that. That's sort of me. You can also catch me on Tea Time every now and again. I'm going to be there this Sunday.
cool.
Um, well, it might be last Sunday for when this goes live. I
Right.
don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm just involved a lot in the Guild Wars 2 community. I love it. So if you ever want to talk Guild Wars 2, Guild Wars 2 or just gaming in general, shoot me a message.
Yeah, man, we should do this again. Thanks, Sneb, for taking a moment to commune with me as gamers do. And thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been the Deeg Podcast. I'll see you in the next conversation. Later.